I'd like to call this Clay County meeting to order on this second day of March 2022 at 3 o'clock p.m. With that, we will have our invocation. Administrator, when you are ready, please proceed.
Yes, please join us in an attitude of prayer. God in heaven, as we begin this meeting, we ask for guidance of our thoughts and actions so that we may have a successful meeting today. Help us to accomplish our goals, and thank you for the opportunity to serve the residents of Clay County. Amen.
Please stand for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Please call the roll.
Commissioner Nolte.
Here.
Commissioner Thompson.
Here.
Commissioner Carpenter.
Here.
That brings us to approval of the agenda. Is there a motion related to the approval of this afternoon's agenda?
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda as printed.
Motion has been made for the approval of the agenda for this afternoon's meeting. Is there any discussion?
No discussion.
Seeing none, you are recognized to close.
I close.
Please call the roll.
Commissioner Thompson.
Yes.
Commissioner Carpenter.
Yes.
That brings us to meeting schedules. Administrator?
Yes, the next meeting of the commission will be Wednesday, March 9th at 6 p.m. here in the chambers.
Thank you. There are no honorary resolutions today. We have no discussion items on today's agenda. Public hearings, there are none listed. There is no consent agenda. That brings us to our regular agenda. First on that list is 2022-68. Administrator?
Yes, Resolution 2022-68 is a request from Ms. Barbara Woods regarding the waiving of her interest and penalties on property tax. The current total for the penalties and interest is $453.43. Ms. Woods is in the audience and would like to present to the commissioner, and then our collector, Barbara O'Reilly, is also available if the commissioners have any questions.
Very good. Would the applicant care to come forward? And I'll mention this as you're going up. I would just say for those here, please make sure that you push the button and the green light is on the collar of the microphone. Yeah, there you go. Please speak directly into the microphone so that they can hear you clearly and you appear on the recording, and do state your name so that we have that on the audio recording for future reference. Please proceed.
Hello, I'm Barbara Woods. Thank you for hearing me today. I have been paying real estate tax here in Clay County on this home for 22 years. I do receive 2 bills. I have another property in Kearney. I received 2 property tax bills in one envelope. I have a routine of coming to the courthouse and paying my bills and getting a receipt at that time. I did read the paperwork thoroughly and indicated that the drop box would only be available that I could pay online or by mail. I chose to bring it to the courthouse and drop it into the mailbox. I did everything exactly as I was supposed to, putting the receipt in there, putting my parcel ID number, writing it out appropriately. This year I noticed that I got both of my real estate tax bills in one envelope. It seemed different to me, so I wanted to make sure I was doing it properly. I put both checks with both receipts into the one envelope. I had also another envelope that was for personal property tax for my car. So I brought them, put them in the box, and did my happy dance, did my little walk around the square. I had funded, put about $8,000 in my bank account, and I'm very diligent about everything I do. And so I was watching my bank account, and I noticed that one of the checks had processed and the other had not. I called Clay County tax, the collector, right away. I'm not a stranger to them. I think very highly of them, always have. And they answered the phone. They put me on hold. They got back and said that they were still processing checks, to please give it another week. I gave it another week. I noticed the money still in my bank account. It had not processed. I called again. I got a phone call back. When I got the phone call back, it just said unknown number. I answered it, and it was someone saying, "You are delinquent. You need to get up there, walk into the Liberty, courthouse, go in and talk to the collector's office." So when I did that, I just thought, this is fine. But somebody approached me from the collector's desk and said, "Well, we kind of have a sludge, we have several checks that haven't processed yet. I'm going to see if you happen to be on one of those." She came back, and I'm very patient. She said, "No, your parcel's not on there at all." And I was told that my only recourse was to pay it, that it was delinquent, and that I would be incurring $453 in penalties and interest. And I told her I didn't think that was fair. And she said, "Can you prove to me that you put it in that box?" And I said, "No, I cannot." And she's like, "Well, all of that, all those envelopes go to my bank downtown. You can go to the bank downtown, community, whatever, and you can ask them if they can find your check. Otherwise, we are just dismissing you." And I asked Barbara Riley if she kept records, because I'd called several times and I really felt like I should be given a chance to for them to understand that I was as diligent as humanly possible following all of their protocol, and I didn't want my account to be penalized. And she said that they are not staffed well, and they're not staffed to keep records of me calling. And I asked her if she had been giving her staff the direction to just wait, we're processing checks, and she said yes. And then one of the ladies with her said, "I would never tell anyone to just wait." And she's like, "She must have got a hold of a temp. I want to know who she talked to." And then Barbara kind of rolled her eyes and said, "Yeah, I think a temp got a hold of it." And she presented me with this paperwork, and that's that. Here I am, following through with trying to get my $453 back.
Thank you. I'm not sure if you mentioned it or not, or it was in your paperwork, but just to verify, this is kind of a first-time event for you as far as having a problem with the check not being delivered? Is this the first time this has occurred?
Absolutely, because I've always went to one of the ladies. I've always been able to walk up to a counter and get a receipt. And I felt like that's very important, because they're busy. I understand that, but I wasn't given the opportunity to do that. And the fact that I talked to my bank about it, and she pulled, this is crucial information, okay? So one of the checks in the envelope cleared, but the other one did not. Did I even say that? So I went to my bank, and she pulled the checks to see the back of it, to see if there was any telltale signs of another check. My daughter, she used to work for the Federal Reserve as a bank. She made sure everything was being done right. But anyway, she acted like there could be a batch. I don't know what the process is when the bank gets a big bag of checks. My bank said that their clients, that the business is responsible for creating the deposit slip, that my bank only receives the checks, and then they have to match up their client's deposit slip. That seems normal. So it seems like our collector she is not responsible for the collecting. The bank downtown is. And I certainly don't have any latitude with the bank downtown. They're not my client, so they're not going to let me sit down and go through anything. They're not even going to talk to me. I'm not their client.
Okay. Commissioner Thompson, do you have any questions you'd like to ask?
I have no questions at this time, but Commissioners, I do think this is a situation, we've had a number of these.
We have.
Now that's been coming up this year, and it just seems like a coincidence that they all seem very, very similar. And I will say, I think we're going to definitely look into our process
Okay.
a little deeper, so we don't have these incidences next year and moving forward. So, but it just seems like we've never had this before. I've been with the county for 6 years, and I've never seen the amount of this caliber of situation that we have here. So I will say
Well,
that.
Thank you for hearing me. I am starting to get phone calls from people asking if I want to sell my property, so I don't know if the delinquency is if it's public knowledge. If people think that I can't afford my home because I was delinquent. So that kind of isn't happy for me.
Yeah.
Because like I said, I'm very diligent, I'm debt-free, and I'm a seamstress, so was very happy that I was able to meet all of my needs through my own income, being a single person. So that's that, I think.
Okay. Commissioner Carpenter?
No questions. I think we might be able to get clarity on whether it's a public information, the delinquency or not, here in a moment. So hopefully that'll be helpful, but no questions. Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Should I hang around or?
Yeah, go ahead and we'll go ahead and hear from the collector. Just to explain our process, you and anyone else who's listening, this is our work session. So the way we will be disposing of items today, unless there's an exception, is whether they would go on consent or regular agenda. A regular agenda item would be something that either meant money flowing out of the county or that had some kind of controversy attached to it. So what will likely happen is this will be put on next week's regular agenda, and at that point we will dispose of it then. But so don't be surprised if we won't be coming to resolution today, but I want to make sure that you're kind of aware of the process.
Yes, I was informed of that, so thank you.
Very good. Come forward and.
Barbara O'Reilly, the collector, and we have contacted the bank, just an FYI, contacted the bank, and they are going back through the payments to make sure that they processed all the payments. And as of, before I come up here, so far they haven't found any checks that haven't been processed. And I have implemented the girls to go through the checks that we had in office, and there has been nothing that wasn't posted. I don't know what happened. But these are the things that I've done to try to eliminate any problems and checking on everything.
Yeah, I mean, it feels to me like the breakdown is happening at the bank. I don't know that until we dig in, but that's certainly the way it feels to me.
It seems that way, and that's why I reached out to the bank to see if they would recheck to make sure everything had been processed. And like I said, so far, and they, I'm sure, are busy, and I don't know that they have it all completed yet. But so far, they have not found anything that hasn't been processed.
I think I might have mentioned at a previous hearing on a similar issue that my wife had worked for a bank for some years, and she outlined, at least in that particular institution at that particular time, what the procedure was, and it involved retaining the envelope for a certain amount of time, which it doesn't sound like that's going on here, but the idea is that if this situation came up, that could be pulled up, they could check the envelope and say, oh, okay, yeah, it's still in there, we just didn't do that. But, and you know, that would be obviously a human error, which is not a big deal as long as you're retaining, the actual original envelope and able to do that. But different banks, different times, different procedures.
And I do want to tell you that any envelopes that we opened in office here, we put in a bag, and someone that has no authority to enter payments will go through the envelopes, open them up, and make sure there's nothing stuck. So if it was anything that was in our office, we do go through it and make sure that nothing got stuck, stapled, or anything.
It can happen.
And it can happen,
And
yes.
thank you very much, because
Okay.
that due diligence is something that we very much appreciate, that your office is going that extra mile and doing that extra process to ensure that we are doing the right service to our constituents and our taxpayers. Commissioner Carpenter, did you have any questions or comments?
Well, just to follow up on the concern about, folks calling, about the property, because maybe there's some kind of public release of the delinquency information.
We do not give any of that information out. You can, of course, look up, if you know somebody has a bill, anybody look up and see if you paid, but we do not give any information out to be used in any sort of way.
And when you say it could be looked up, can you tell me more about what you mean by that?
What's that now?
In terms of, you said it can be looked up.
Well, I could look yours up, if I know your name or your address, I can look up, it's public information.
Right, so the delinquency information would be public on there, but they would have to go person by person in order to find
They would have to go
it.
person by person.
There
It's
isn't,
not-
like a-
There's nothing, no.
Right, no database of
No
delinquent
delinquent-
payers.
No.
Okay.
You would have to go person by person, you'd have to know their full name, address, or more information than just, yeah.
Understood, thank you.
Just want to follow up on Commissioner Carpenter's point before we go to Commissioner Thompson, and that is, and I am no tech guy, let's face it, but I'm wondering if there is some kind of a search engine or an application that could go through our database and basically troll around for that kind of a thing. I don't expect you to necessarily have an answer to that, because it's a relatively technical question. I ask that almost rhetorically as something that we might consider if that's being done, or if it is something that maybe some entities routinely do with public databases.
I don't think you can search anything. I think you would have to be very technical. I'm sure there's somebody that could, but you would have to know a lot of details, and it's buried deeply in the system. And there's checks and balances in our system, so I really don't think anyone could do that. I'm sure they could, but it would take some time and effort, so.
Well, thank you. Commissioner Thompson?
And no other comments, thank you.
Okay. Are there any further questions? Is there well, first off, is there anyone else who would like to comment on this issue before we go forward? Okay, seeing none. 2022-68, because it involves the expenditure of monies, or at least the return of monies potentially. Regular agenda?
That's fine.
2022-68 will appear on next week's regular agenda. And did you catch when that meeting was going to be? Because that will be next Wednesday, a week from today, but it will be at 6 p.m. That brings us to 2022-72.
Yes, Resolution 2022-72 is consideration by the Commission for the renewal of the county's property and casualty insurance with travelers. Josh Gary, who is the county's insurance broker, is here to provide information about this information. It's 12 lines of coverage under our property and casualty insurance, and the premium totals slightly over $2.2 million. So with that, Mr. Gary.
Please proceed.
Thank you, Commissioners. My name is Josh Gary, and I am president of Gary & Associates, and I have been the county's insurance consultant for approximately 10 years regarding the property casualty portion of our insurance. As the county administrator said, our renewal this year has gone from roughly $2 million to $2.2 million. It's roughly a $200,000 increase, not quite, but close. There are three major items that are causing the increase. The largest item is the workers' compensation insurance, which went up approximately $60,000 of that $200,000. In workers' compensation, there are three categories that are considered. The first is the type of risk that the employee is dealing with. If you're a sheriff, you have a different risk than if you're an administrator. So those rates, nice job. Those rates obviously vary depending on the category of the employee. The second item is the total payroll costs. Our payroll this year went up rather dramatically. As a matter of fact, we added well over, I think, 100 new employees to the county's payroll. And that has increased the formula, if you will, to the point where we're having to generate more revenue. The third item is the entity's experience modification. Our experience mod, when we first got involved in this, was roughly around 2.0. A brand new company getting workers' compensation insurance for the very first time would be given a 1.0 mod by the state workers' compensation department. We have worked with the travelers diligently, and quite frankly, with the risk management staff of the county, and we have now brought that down to 1.0. This has made a dramatic impact in what we've have to spend. So the workers' compensation is the largest increase we incur this year. The second one is law enforcement liability. It went from approximately 283 to 326. And of course, that is activity that's conducted at the sheriff's office. And as we all know, there are things just built into what their responsibilities are that causes certain amount of claims to take place, and we've had a number of those claims. And to be blunt, in my opinion, that would go up regardless, just because underwriters anticipate that type of a scenario. The third item is the EPLI insurance. EPLI stands for Employment Practices Liability Insurance. And those insurance items are things like wrongful termination, sexual discrimination, harassment, etc. And that is one of the leading causes of claims throughout the country. And those rates would go up regardless of whether or not we had claims. We did have claims. I also want to let the commission know that every year we do a very detailed claims analysis with the travelers. And this year, the county administrator will join us as we go through all of that, where we spend several hours going through each and every claim and how those claims are being adjudicated, so that we have a good handle, A, on what's going on, and on B, on what we can do to do better as the year goes forward. So we will be doing that in April this year. The only other thing I would like to bring to the commission's attention is that we did have a decrease in our auto exposure, which has been going up in the last couple of years, and this year went down. And it went down primarily because of our reduction in number of vehicles that we have. But it's important to note that as we do our activities, these rates on all these different lines of coverages will react to that. So there's positive and sometimes obviously things that we don't want to see, but nevertheless. The work comp is not a negative. The work comp is a positive. It's just that we've added so much payroll that it's increased our cost. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you. On the part of the, that's going up under claims for different practices, I guess, the
EPLI.
EPLA, I guess I'd have two questions. One would be that it seems to me there are two things that would drive that cost, perhaps three. One would be the increased number of employees, because that increases the number of opportunities for something to happen. The other two things that occur to me, one is an overall increase in that coverage just because of the general societal atmosphere and the risk incurred more generically. And then the third item would be number of claims that and how they would be settled within the county itself, which is the one that probably that we have, I don't know if we have control over so much, but it's kind of in-house. My question is, how are we trending in a good position? Are we seeing fewer or more historically, and how do any of those impinge on what we're talking about on the increase?
For those of us who've been around for a while, we know we've seen a certain amount of claims, particularly lawsuits, that the county has been involved in over several years. We've it's no secret, I mean, they're out there. We've had some sexual harassment items, and I cannot tell you, Commissioner, if we're better or worse off today than what we were. What I can tell you is that what the insurance company feels is, and I mentioned this last year when we were doing our renewal, that there is a better atmosphere in the relationship between the commission and various other departments that have led to what we believe are more positive outcomes. And yes, you're right, the more people you have, you hire, some don't work out and then they're unhappy and there's wrongful termination, accusations, et cetera. And obviously the more people you have, you're going to potentially have those kinds of things. But on the whole, I feel that the insurance company, in my conversations with them, and as I told the county administrator, by the time we get to where we're at, we've had numerous conversations to get us to this point. What they have said, and they said it from the get-go, and this started last year, that they felt that the commission was on a better path and therefore led to better outcomes.
When we're talking about that, because obviously, you know, when we're looking at race, we're looking at history. It occurs to me that the atmosphere and a decreased number of claims is rather a lagging indicator, so that we may or may not see the benefit of those things going forward in the immediate term. How can you talk about how we might be looking as far as going forward goes? Is this something that you see increasing, assuming all things stay the same, which of course they won't, but broadly, I'm wanting to kind of see if you feel that we are on a good enough track and that we will see perhaps maybe lesser increases, assuming we can keep going in the proper trajectory that we seem to be on.
What I can tell you for sure is that the risk management department that the county has been very proactive, and in my opinion has lessened the exposure that the county has had. So when we do get a claim, their resources to try to resolve those claims in a what I will call a smart fashion has saved the county lots of money. Dollar amount I can't give you, but they have been very proactive. I do see, well, as the auto, as an example, we are having fewer auto claims, and we put into effect during the last year a series of auto, not regulations, but directives on how we wanted people who were driving the county's cars and trucks, et cetera, to behave in situations. And I think all of those things are working in our favor. Risk management is not something that you can make a change today and boom, it's all fixed. These are things that take time. They take education of our employees, and with X number of new employees, you can see that we've got some education process that we'll have to go through. But I do think we're on the right track, and I do think we're in a better place than we have been really in the last several years.
I certainly would point out to the administrator that we appreciate the diligence and the hard work of those in risk management and your overseeing of those departments. Commissioner Carpenter?
Thank you. So first on workers' comp, you know, that's the largest increase in real dollars. It's not the largest percentage increase, but I want to start there. You mentioned over 100 new employees.
Right.
So can you expound on that a little bit in terms of like how many of those folks are new full-time employees versus temp folks?
What I have been told is that there were a significant increase by use of the American Rescue dollars in the Sheriff's Department, so that a lot of those would be in that arena. And that's obviously, that is something that we have to pay close attention to. And that was kind of who I was referencing when I talked about training and making sure we get the right things done. But that was my understanding of where they were. Somewhere in my notes I have this. And if I can't find it quickly, I'll get back to you with it.
Okay, I appreciate it. It looks like we might get more information here in a minute. That number comes as a surprise to me. I will say that. That would represent, especially if those are brand new full-time employees, that would represent for a county of our size quite an enormous increase in personnel. That would be news to me. But thank you. So let's go to the law enforcement liability number then, because that is one where we have a pretty big percentage increase, especially if we go back to 2020. I mean, it's just under 50% higher than where it was in 2020. Is that's directly related to new claims?
It's a combination of things. It is directly related to new claims, but it's also related to the risk itself. And as I mentioned in my comments, if we were doing great, we would probably still see a bump in that line of coverage because historically we know that things occur in that environment. So we have to be prepared for that.
Well, in terms of the claims piece, I understand that. Obviously, law enforcement comes with it all kinds of potential liability, but that was true 2 or 3 years ago as well. So in terms of what would account for the almost 50% increase since 2020, I assume there were plenty of liability concerns in 2020 as well.
I think this last year, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think we had somebody pass away in the jail.
Right.
And so those kinds of events tend to color not only what the losses are dollar and cents wise, but the direction in which we're going.
Understood, thanks. And then the last one is the general liability line. That's another one where it's about a 30% increase from last year and over a 50% increase if you go back to 2020. Any sense of why?
Yeah, that's claims. We had a number of problems at the lake specifically with people having problems at the dock and so forth, and we had a large volume of claims, and that's what drove it between 20 and 21, and we're still paying for some of that.
Okay, thank you, appreciate it.
I see the auditors stepped up. If you were going to testify in general, I'll go ahead and wait and go to Commissioner Thompson, but did you have something you wanted to specifically address on Commissioner Carpenter's questions before we leave that subject? Well, let's go ahead, if that's
No,
okay.
that's fine. My question's very similar.
So, yeah, go ahead and address that. That might well enlighten us all on those issues.
Victor Hilbert, Clay County Auditor. I just want to jump in real quick on the question about the employee increase that has come up. So as we laid out in the digital budget book, you can go look at the personnel change from the 2021 budget to the 22 budget, and that does indicate a net 20 full-time equivalent decrease countywide to 583 FTEs. So I think where the matter of confusion can be, and certainly we can understand, we know everything here at the county about our county government. Mr. Gary's a insurance broker, he knows his field, and so I think the point of maybe miscommunication or clarification between us is what I had heard from the risk management side at the county was that a lot of the reason for the workers' comp increase might have been due to, frankly, a good thing of higher pay for our sheriff deputies. As you recall, we did shift something on the order of $1.5 million in the 2021 budget to the sheriff's office, and they hired new employees as well. So I think that might proportionally factor into the workers' comp calculation. Another thing I just want to clarify is we did reimburse $750,000 of sheriff payroll because it was eligible with the CARES Act. We have not done anything with the rescue plan for sheriff payroll to date. So I just want to make those points of clarifications, not to question the testimony really, just I think it's miscommunication between what I had heard of the reason for that workers' comp increase versus the employee count. So that's all I have.
Does that help?
Well, if yeah, it does help certainly. I mean, obviously there's a net full-time employee decrease of 20 versus an increase of over 100 is those are two very different numbers. So I think we'll need to probably all seek a little more clarity on that situation.
But you have to remember that payroll is the issue. It's not number of employees, it's payroll. So with the payroll going up, That's what causes that. Payroll is the factor.
Right, so even if there weren't more employees, you're saying?
Exactly. If the payroll goes up, you're still dealing with that increased payroll.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Thompson?
I have no further questions right now, thank you.
Very well. Did the auditor have any other follow-up information you'd like to impart? Okay, anyone else care to speak on 2022-72? Seeing none, this is, of course, involves the expenditure of money, so 2022 on for regular agenda for next week? Very good. 2022-72 will appear on next week's regular agenda. That brings us to 2022-74. Administrator?
Yes, Resolution 2022-74 is Commissioners' consideration to appoint Gary Zaborek as the County Health Officer. He currently serves as the Director of the Public Health Center, and by state statute, on an annual basis, the Commission must appoint that individual holding that office as the County Health Officer. So this is more of a housekeeping issue that is before the Commission on an annual basis. Unfortunately, I don't believe he was able to attend today, and we hope that maybe he can join us next week.
Very good. Are there any questions or comments? Commissioner Thompson?
No questions, thank you.
Commissioner Carpenter?
Oh, just briefly to council, if I could. In a theoretical scenario in which we didn't pass this resolution appointing him as the county health officer, any sense of what would happen?
I'm not sure what the practical effect of us not having a county health officer would be in this case, because it doesn't change his job. It's a separate body. But the reality is it is a statutory obligation of the commission for statute to do it. So if someone chose to file an amendment against the county requiring us to do it, we would have some struggles prevailing there. I don't know if they would, but again, it is mostly us.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it. And to your initial point, it wouldn't have any impact on his role as health director with the health department.
So he is the health director of a separate body.
Right.
Statute says that we shall appoint that person in that role as our county health officer. But I have to tell you, I have to confess, I don't know what additional value that brings. Being the county health officer, I don't know if it does. He still has his role. But obviously, my recommendation would be that we pass it.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
One follow-up question, Mr. Counselor, and that is, Mr. Zaborek derives the authority of his office by virtue of his position with the health department, so this does not necessarily impart a great deal more authority. Is that correct?
That's correct.
I would stop short of saying it is ceremonial. I don't think that's quite accurate, but clearly this does not necessarily assign any market increase in his ability to do his job. This is, again, I hate to say it, but it is to some extent ceremonial, I guess, is the feel I get from it.
That is correct. And, it would become more problematic if we decided to appoint someone else as county health officer and empower that person with a budget and duties. That would certainly become problematic, I think, at least from their perspective at the health board.
And the thing is, the office we're talking about has had some controversy, both locally and across the country, but this does not necessarily really add or detract markedly from any consideration on that, any particular controversy. This does not increase or decrease it in a very marked way.
That's correct.
Okay. Commissioner Thompson, did you have anything?
No, I don't, thank you.
Very well. While this could potentially have controversy attached to it, I don't see it at this moment. My recommendation for the commission is that we put this on for consent. How does the commission feel?
I think given that we have no real choice in the matter, and given that it doesn't impact whether or not he continues in that role, because of those reasons, I'm comfortable with consent.
I'm fine with that.
Very well. In that case, 2022-74 will appear on next week's consent agenda. We may Mr. Counselor, just to follow up right quick, if Mr. Zabrak is able to join us next meeting, I'm assuming we could allow him to speak. Would that require us to remove this from the consent agenda and take it up separately?
You wouldn't have to do that necessarily. You could certainly, as you take the consent agenda up next week, you could ask Mr. Zabrak, I see you have something on the consent agenda. Would you like to speak to that before we vote?
I thought that was probably the case, but I wanted to verify.
Yeah.
Very good. That brings us to 2022-53, Administrator.
Yes, Resolution 2022-53 is a topic that has been before the commission, and at staff's request, we pulled the item for your consideration, giving us an opportunity to do a little bit more research on this. This is consideration of a payment to Answer Kansas City, which is a phone answering service that is utilized by the collector's office during peak season of taxes. And I believe County Councilor Graham has some information to share with commissioners.
Please proceed.
Yes, Commission. I requested this be removed 2 weeks ago when it was in front of the commission. Just want to make sure that we had a chance to look at this. I have received more detailed billing from Answer Kansas City, as well as having multiple conversations with their folks. In the detailed billing, they actually have a call log. And my recollection is about 13,000 entries on that call log. It is undisputed that this company did a tremendous amount of work through last half of November into the first week of January. There's no question about it that they did do a tremendous amount of work. I did talk to them about the late fees. Those have been removed. I have an updated invoice for everyone that I'll pass out here in just a moment with a new total of $72,475.93. And just for what it's worth, I will also share that I talked with the company that we will want to have probably a slightly different process this coming year, now that we are transitioning away from an elected collector to a collector that's working as an appointed collector, that we will almost certainly take a different approach on how we're going to do this, and that we would be happy to have that conversation with them, but it won't go through the same process.
And my understanding is the process is really what we are dealing with at this moment, although obviously the quality of their work is something that we do have to be cognizant of, and at some point it would be good to verify that there is satisfaction. I get the feeling there is with the quality of work done by this particular vendor.
Yeah, so I'll give you an example. They actually do some training. They're not just an answering service. They actually learn they have a working knowledge of Missouri collection law for a county, and they attempt and they're able to give some information that assists the collector's office, because the collector's office would be swamped at this time of year. Next year or this coming year, we're going to have to make a choice about how we handle those inquiries, because those inquiries will happen. Regardless. Now, one thing I did want to point out that I picked up on, and I think one of the commissioners, it might have been Commissioner Thompson, picked up on, for some reason this contract is a 24/7 contract, but I was assured that they received almost no phone calls outside of working hours, and there was not any additional special cost to answer the phone at 3 in the morning versus 3 in the afternoon. So that made me feel a little better. I thought that was an odd thing to have in there, but I feel comfortable that it did not cost us much, if anything.
Okay.
So I'll give you the new invoice.
Okay. Thank you.
So I guess, and finally, I would say that I am comfortable proceeding with this at your discretion, of course.
Okay. Commissioner Thompson, did you have any questions or comments for the counselor?
I have no questions. I'm glad that this company was a reliable resource for our collector's office. I know it gets awfully hectic down there about that time of year, so I'm glad it was a good purchase. But yeah, I'm looking forward to having conversations to see what else we can do for the upcoming years.
Commissioner Carpenter.
No questions, thanks.
All right. We just got new information. Of course, this involves the expenditure of funding. Is there anyone else who would like to comment on this issue before we go forward with it? Seeing none, my recommendation would be 2022-53 be on our regular agenda next week.
Agreed.
Very good.
And I will say, just, I apologize, it is not an emergency. I'm not asking it be passed today. And we're going to change the title so that it just reflects that it is not an emergency. That change will be in there for you to see next week.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, it does say emergency purchase. Very good. So that'll appear on next week's regular agenda. Thank you for the clarification. Certainly appreciate the late fee being removed. That brings us to 2022-71. Administrator?
Yes, Resolution 2022-71 is authorization to complete and update the Form 4379, which is with the Department of Revenue. This comes to us from the auditor. In essence, what it's doing is adding my name to that, so that I also then will have the ability to have access at the database from the state, which has to do with sales tax, which is proprietary information, and so they should be very protective on who has access to individual business information, but from a budget standpoint and a forecasting standpoint is the benefit for me to have access to that information.
Mr. Auditor?
Yes, Victor Hurlbert, Clay County Auditor. No, I think Administrator really covered it. It's just a housekeeping item that we want to make sure we're up to date with the state, and certainly adding the budget officer and administrator on that form, just like we did when, in previous personnel changes. So that's really the whole purpose of this, and just following that precedent.
Well, this appears to have no controversy or cost. The question I would have is it the opinion of staff, of the administrator specifically, that we pass this today? Will that markedly affect your ability to perform?
No, I think putting it on next week's agenda for approval is fine. Certainly the auditor and his staff have access to it, so the county has information that we can monitor that and continue to monitor our budget on revenues on a monthly basis.
Very well. Are there any questions, Commissioner Thompson?
No questions, thank you.
No questions.
Very well. The recommendation would be 2022-71 on next week's consent agenda. Is that
I agree.
acceptable? Very good. 2022-71 will appear on the consent agenda for next week. That brings us to 2022-75. Administrator?
Yes, Resolution 2022-75 is once again updating some information as a result of personnel changes. In essence, a new county administrator. This has to do with authorization with UMB Bank regarding designation for approval for bond proceeds. And this comes as a request of our auditor for clarification and their certificates of participation.
Mr.
Yes,
Auditor.
Victor Hurlbert, Clay County Auditor. So yes, as Administrator said, our trustee, UMB, requires that we sign every time we have a new personnel change. And I would actually ask for this one to be passed same day. The reason being, we do have some bond requisition payments in the pipeline that we would like to pay as soon as we can. Essentially, I would ask that. Again, the only change is the county administrator position, but UMB will require this. They won't accept bond requisitions as signed unless they have this approved by you all. So.
And am I correct that this would be a totally new signature card, so that it would require the signature of all persons listed on here?
That's correct.
Okay. And does the administrator concur with the recommendation of the auditor?
Yes, I would recommend that if commission would be desirable to pass it. I actually have things in the works requesting my signature for payment on work that has been done.
Very good. Commissioner Carpenter, do you have any questions or comments?
No questions.
Commissioner Thompson?
No questions, thank you.
Request has been made for approval today. Is there any comment on that particular aspect from the commission?
No, but I would move that we approve 2022-75.
Very well. Motion has been made for the approval of 2022-75. Discussion? Commissioner Thompson?
No questions, thank you.
Is there any discussion from any members of the public? Seeing none, you're recognized to close.
Thank you. I close.
Please call the roll.
Commissioner Carpenter?
Yes.
Commissioner Thompson?
Yes.
Very good. That brings us to 2022-70. Administrator?
Yes, Resolution 2022-70 is consideration for the utilization of American Rescue Plan Act funding for a stormwater project in the Oak Brook subdivision. This is requested by our Highway Department. This has been submitted and reviewed by our auditor to ensure there's compliance with the regulations by Treasury to utilize this under the infrastructure category of these funds that are provided by the federal government. And with that, we have Deputy County Administrator Carl Walters here to provide information to the Commission.
Please proceed.
Good afternoon, Commission. Carl Walters, Deputy County Administrator. I bring forth to you request for Arpa funds on the Oak Bridge subdivision and give you a little bit of past history on this. It was actually developed in 2006. It lays between A Highway and Plattsburgh Road on 136th Street, sits to the south of that. And what happened was there was a new innovation of a subdivision to be put in, and they decided through P&Z with the surveyors, ALIT surveying, to put in flat curbs. And their process was to see if they could take rain gardens on the homeowners' properties so that the water shed would go into the rain gardens to keep the water from, going through storm drains down into the creeks and everybody, to stop all this stormwater overreach. As that took place, what took place was there was no guidance or no rules set in place on where these gardens should be placed on the property when they should have been set where the most obvious place to be, the water coming off the road, and there was no guidance to that. So in saying that, what happened was we do have some storm boxes and drains there, but a lot of it was supposed to fit to the rain gardens, and then people saw that it wasn't fit, so they took rain gardens out. Some rain gardens are still in place. Some work, not so much. As it developed, we had a lot of silt coming off the roads, going down to the boxes, and of course we have some of it that some of the rainwater is just sitting there, won't go to the box. So we had HOA and P&Z and Highway met out there to turn around and see what the cause was and what the situation was at hand. What we had was stormwater coming off as people were building, the mud and stuff was getting off onto the road, going down to the boxes. Nobody was turning around putting anything around the boxes, so there was nobody actually, putting a control on it. So with that being said, some of the storm drains was plugging up, and so we got issues with that, water standing on the road, backing up when they turn around and have regular rainwater. So we've got an on-site contractor to come down and look at it to tell us, hey, what can we do to fix this? And talking to the HOA and P&Z and we got together with the contractor to see, hey, can you tell us what it'll take to fix this? So he gave us a bid of around $40,000 to take it. And then we looked at it and talking with the auditor saying, hey, can we put this under the Arpa funds because it's stormwater, a stormwater drain issue. And it is. We have erosion problems, and then we have the stormwater going down into the storm box that's backing up onto the road, and then, people's driving through depths of water. So what we're trying to do is trying to get this corrected.
Very good. Commissioner Thompson, do you have any questions or comments?
I have no questions, but I love always seeing you up here, Carl, because I know we're fixing something all the time. So I love that we're going to get this project underway and get this taken care of.
That'd be great.
Hopefully, yes.
Commissioner Carpenter?
No questions. Thanks.
Thank you.
All right, is there anyone else who would care to speak on this issue? Seeing none. Obviously, expenditure of money 2022-70 on the regular agenda. Very well. 2022-70 will appear on the regular agenda for our next meeting. That brings us to our final issue, 2022-73. Administrator?
Yes, Resolution 2022-73 is consideration to approve an extended maintenance and service agreement with Syntec Systems coming from our IT department. And IT Manager Kevin Shaw is here to provide information to the commission.
Please
Good
proceed.
afternoon. I'm Kevin Shaw, the IT Director for Clay County. We bring before you now this resolution to approve this contract renewal with Syntec Systems. It's for extended maintenance on Fuel Master, the fuel management software system that the fuel pumps have at the Highway Department. This agreement is a one-year term at $2,650 with automatic renewals for the next 5 years. This has been budgeted in our 228 Service and Maintenance Agreement account. And that's really, if there's any questions, I'm here for them.
Commissioner Carpenter?
No questions, thanks.
Commissioner Thompson?
No questions.
Okay. Any comments from anyone else? Seeing none. Regular agenda for 2022-73?
Agreed.
Very well. 2022-73 will appear on our regular agenda at our next meeting. With that, is there a motion related to today's regular agenda?
Commissioner, I move that we place the following items on the agenda for next Wednesday, 6 p.m. On the consent agenda, 2022-74 and 2022-71. And on the regular agenda, 2022-68, 72, 53, 70, and 73.
Very well. Motion has been made for the distribution of the items on today's regular agenda to be put on the consent and regular agenda as listed by the commissioner. Discussion? And again, any comment from the audience? Seeing none, you are recognized to close.
I close.
Please call the roll.
Commissioner Carpenter?
Yes.
Commissioner Thompson?
Yes.
Very well. That brings us to number 12, comments on non-agenda items. Are there any members of the public who would care to comment on any items not appearing on today's agenda? Seeing none. Are there any office holders who would care to comment on any items not appearing on today's agenda? Seeing none. Are there any agencies who would like to make any comments on items not appearing on today's agenda? Seeing none. County Administrator, do you have any comments that you would care to make?
I have no comments, thank you.
Brings us to Commissioner comments. Commissioner Thompson?
I have nothing really to report, except for I'm really loving this week's weather. So if we can continue this, that'd be really great. I'd really like to not go back to snow.
I will entertain a motion to that effect.
Okay, let's do it.
Commissioner Carpenter?
No comments, thank you.
And I have none either. So that brings us to approval of minutes of previous sessions. We have the minutes of 3 sessions listed: Wednesday, January 5, 2022, 2 p.m., Wednesday, January 12, 2022, 4 p.m., and Wednesday, January 12, 2022, 6 p.m. Is there a motion related to those items?
I'll make a motion to approve the said 3 sets of meeting minutes as printed.
Motion's been made for the approval of the 3 meeting minutes that are listed on today's agenda. Any discussion? Seeing none, you're recognized to close.
I close.
Please call the roll.
Commissioner Thompson?
Yes.
Commissioner Carpenter?
Yes.
That brings us to written reports. I believe we have written reports before us.
Yes, we have 2. We have the monthly report. I believe that they're in front of you. The county clerk, a monthly report for the month of February, and then the county collector's annual report for 2021 tax year.
Thank you very much. Brings us to executive sessions. There are none listed on today's meeting. That brings us to adjournment. We are adjourned. Thank you very much. An hour, that's not too bad.
Okay, so this is the one they just passed. It looks like you guys are on the